Today, we have very important news to report, and that is the Sheriff's Department, along with a collaborative team of federal, local, and state resources, has put together an eradication strategy for the Antelope Valley, which specifically has eradicated one gang formerly known as Lancas 13. The Antelope Valley Gang Task Force this morning served 40 federal and state search warrants, primarily throughout the Antelope Valley and parts of Santa Clarita Valley. The task force arrested 10 people for federal indictments, conspiring to distribute narcotics, weapon violations, and participating in a street gang. 16 felony warrants and 22 weapons were also seized, along with the small amounts of narcotics. There were also 5 children who were taken into protective custody and 7 who will be actively monitored by the Department of Children and Family Services. Moreover, the weapons here and others that are not here were acquired by the probation's disarm program, along with sheriff deputies and those searching these properties where we executed the warrants. This year-long investigation has now culminated in a total of 97 arrests for felonies, and 51 weapons were seized. The task force consists of the Sheriff's Safe Streets Bureau, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the United States Attorney General's Office, and today, operation was assisted by deputies from our community-oriented enforcement teams, our gang enforcement teams, and our specialized teams of deputies from Lancaster, Palmdale, and Santa Clarita stations. And let me say a few things about this particular gang, the Lancas 13. It is a sophisticated criminal enterprise with defined leadership and association with the Mexican Mafia, and it is one of the larger and more aggressive gangs in the northern Los Angeles County area. Lancas 13 was formed in the 1980s in the city of Lancaster, and by 2009 had grown to over 150 members. Members of this gang have victimized the community by committing drive-by shootings, assaults with deadly weapons, narcotics distributions, burglaries, thefts, prostitution, criminal conspiracy, and also 2 murders, one in front of the local high school and another in front of a busy store. As with all of these investigations, today's operation is the beginning. The United States Attorney is now going to move forward with prosecuting phase. I'd like to introduce Tom O'Brien, who will speak about his effort in prosecuting this case. Tom?
Thank you, Sheriff Baca, and thank you for hosting this event today. This morning, approximately 400 federal agents and local law enforcement officials fanned out throughout the high desert in order to strike at the leadership of a notorious street gang. Earlier today, we unsealed a federal grand jury indictment which charges 10 members of Lancas 13, primarily operating in the Lancaster, Palmdale, and Santa Clarita areas with ties to the Mexican Mafia, in a drug conspiracy case involving methamphetamine, crack cocaine, marijuana, and prescription pills, as well as federal firearms charges. Members of the conspiracy charged today are facing life in federal prison. All are looking at a 10-year mandatory minimum. Several are looking at 20-year mandatory minimums. And one of these gang members is looking at a mandatory life in prison without the possibility of parole. The federal grand jury indictment charges Troy Larson, the leader of the Lancas 13 gang, as well as 4 others who are the next highest ranking members of this street gang, considered to be Lancas lieutenants, or Larson's lieutenants. Intercepted communications during federal wiretaps and jail calls reveal that this street gang was actively recruiting and absorbing other Hispanic street gangs. Over the past year, my office has indicted approximately 1,000 gang members in this district. We've done numerous street gang cases in Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County. We did the first RICO gang case in Santa Barbara's history, the first gang sweep in Santa Maria, as well as gang operations in the Coachella Valley and Santa Ana. Only 2 weeks ago, Sheriff Bach and I stood before you and announced the indictment of 48 members of individuals linked to a Mexican cartel moving black tar heroin through 11 street gangs in Los Angeles County. Less than 2 weeks ago, Riverside DA Rod Pacheco stood before you and announced a joint federal and local law enforcement operation which resulted in the arrest of approximately 100 gang members in the Desert Hot Springs area. Our message today is clear. If you are an active street gang member operating in this federal district, we know who you are, we know where you are, we know what you are doing, and we will use all available federal and local law enforcement resources in order to hold you accountable for your criminal activity.
Thank you. One of the important things about the federal side of this prosecution is that individuals who are convicted will serve much lengthier sentences in the penal system of America for their crimes, and they will also be distributed in incarceration facilities throughout the country instead of the convenience of their personal lives. I'd also want to say that State Senator George Runner has been a great supporter of innovative strategies to deal with the crime problems within California, but in particularly the crime that is committed by gangs. And I'd like George to please have the opportunity to say a few words on that.
Thank you, Sheriff. First of all, let me thank the good work of both the state involvement, the county involvement, the sheriff's office, certainly the federal involvement. But let me also specifically thank those of you who went and knocked on some doors and ran out some people today. We don't have to think back but just a couple of weeks to know how dangerous that job is and what risk goes on when you put yourself in harm's way. So let me just say thank you for myself, for our community, and for my family. We went through the statistics. You heard the statistics in regards to the kinds of crimes, the individuals, the amount of arrests that have taken place. The statistic that you didn't hear is one that we're not going to really know. What we're not going to know is how many rapes aren't going to be committed as a result of what took place today. How many assaults aren't going to take place. How many burglaries aren't going to take place. And how many murders aren't going to take place. That's the real story about this event today, is about the great work that was done, but the protection of our communities in the future. And so I just want to thank for the visions of both the Lancaster, Palmdale, for the communities here, and also for the Sheriff's Department in working out and strategizing this effort to do their job in making our community safe. Thanks so very much.
And now, Mayor Parris.
A couple years ago we met with the sheriff and we talked about how in the city of Lancaster and in the city of Palmdale, we aren't interested in suppressing gangs. We're not interested in working with gangs. We're not interested in playing basketball with gangs. We want to destroy every gang that comes up here. And the Sheriff's Department has been absolutely incredible in creating totally innovative ways to do that. This gang has been totally destroyed. If you add up the prison sentences these 97 people are going to get, it will be over 1,000 years. 1,000 years. And the message to other gangs, if you want to come to Lancaster and Palmdale, get ready to spend 1,000 years in prison, because that's going to be the result. And Sheriff, we cannot thank you enough for rescuing our community, because that's exactly what you and your men have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Ledford.
Again, on behalf of our community, we want to say thank you to all involved. Great work. We appreciate it, and we know the sacrifice that you make every day protecting our communities. I can tell you we have with us today, I have Councilmember Mike Dispenza and Councilmember Tom Lackey here today as well to say thank you to all your efforts. And ladies and gentlemen, I think the issue here is when our sheriff is given the resources to be able to get out there ahead of this, this is the type of activity we're going to see more of. And for the Antelope Valley, it's very important that we maintain this very assertive path that says to the gang community, this is not a place where you want to be. So I want to congratulate again everybody. Again, to our sheriff, thank you very much. You have followed through on your commitment to the Antelope Valley. Thank you.
I forgot. We'd like to thank the fairgrounds for making the facilities and the food available to us. I'd also like to introduce Vice Mayor Smith, Ron Smith, Councilwoman Sherry Marcus, Councilman Ken Mann, and we have Carrie Schmidt from Lancaster Baptist Church. Interestingly enough, in the Antelope Valley, we've involved the churches in this gang suppression in a way this gang eradication in a way that's never been done before. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Let me summarize by saying this. The entire story is based on the fundamental principle of leadership. And all of the individuals who have been out there in the field dealing with the preparation of these warrants, dealing with the strategies to locate the suspects, identifying the features of their past crimes and present crimes to wrap them into this place where now they're under arrest and will be prosecuted. This is a result of the leadership of individual deputy sheriffs and individual drug enforcement agents, individual prosecutors from the federal prosecution perspective, and individuals within the community that cooperate with us in the context of joint responsibility along with joint leadership. This is how this is done. It is no longer a one-person show. It is everyone putting their energy to the task at hand. Two individuals who I rely on the most for this effort are the captains of Palmdale Station and the captain of Lancaster. Bobby Denham is the captain of the Lancaster Station, and got it the other way around. Bobby Denham is the captain of the Palmdale Station, and Axel Anderson is the captain of the Lancaster Station. And it's good to confuse them in a sense because they both work in the interest of the entire San Gabriel Valley. Here I am getting gone to the San Gabriel Valley, San Antelope Valley. I think I better stop talking and tell you that I'm so focused on who's leading this that I'm not leading much right now. So let me say this. Those are our comments, and anyone now that has a question or two may ask that now. Where are we with this total strategy? Simply this. We have a high level of need for the enforcement piece that we've announced today. We cannot deal with violence without arrests. We cannot deal with murders, robberies, rapes, and all various forms of felonies, including drug dealing, unless we make those arrests. We are demonstrating today our enthusiastic energy with public cooperation to deal with the most violent side of a gang problem. But at the same time, we have a comprehensive strategy for intervention. We have a VITA program, a voluntary intervention and directional alternatives program here. We have a program in our schools that allows us to go forward and educate young people as to the perils of gangs. We have community activated programs with volunteers and reserve deputy sheriffs who are actually community members working within the sheriff stations to engage a solution in a prevention mode. So when we talk about the hard side of law enforcement, we're strong on that. But we're also willing to say to people, get out of a gang. In fact, the captains send letters to the family members telling the family leaders, the parents particularly, here's how you can identify your part of the solution by helping us. And we tell them that your child has been seen with gang members, and they have. Deputies in radio cars know what kids are up to. They're part of the story here, too. Once we know that a kid is hanging out with a gang, then we want their parents to know before we have to arrest them for a crime problem. And the parents are shocked in many cases. And the parents will also come back to us and say, I had no idea. And yet there's another phenomenon from this. And that is that the kid himself that didn't get a letter that's been associated with gangs is asking us to send a letter to their parents. You see, gangs are oppressive, intimidating organizations that look for easy targets to bring into the gang itself. Their recruitment strategy is one of intimidation. So once the parent knows that we're up to the task of working with them to prevent their child from being a member of a gang, they start to get more proactive. So I think we've got a balanced approach in the Antelope Valley, and I think that this balanced approach is critical to the whole solution of dealing with gangs.
How long did the investigation take place, and how much community involvement did you guys get?
We get extensive community involvement. I'll call the two captains up here because I'd like them to expound on that. So if Captain Anderson and Captain Denham could come on up. I'd appreciate that. Where are you? This is a very important part of the story. Our community here is very proactive.
I first of all would like to say that in my 31 years with the Sheriff's Department, never have I had or seen the support that we get from the community here in the Antelope Valley, and they literally have stepped up in every phase of our efforts here to eradicate gangs in the Antelope Valley, and certainly we wouldn't be here today without the support that we get, and we get it across the board from 300 neighborhood watch groups in each city to people volunteering. We have hundreds and hundreds of people that volunteer up here, to providing us also with information and intelligence on gang activity and the parent support to try to get their kids out of gangs. And certainly when you talk about support, the Antelope Valley is unsurpassed with the amount of support that we get.
I'll just make a quick comment. This particular investigation that yielded what you see today lasted for about a year. Okay, very, very complex investigation that required about a year to get to where we are. In terms of community support, I've never worked in a community where we get more support from our citizens. We went from somewhere in the city of Lancaster, about 10 neighborhood watches, where we have over 100 neighborhood watch groups now. So we're very proud of the community. We couldn't do the job without them, and we expect to be working very closely with them all the way into the future.
Yes, sir. In our particular case, the U.S. Attorney's Office was very clear that the penalties for similar crimes in the federal system are much more severe. And Tom, I don't know if you want to expound on anything about those penalties, but that's a very key element to what constitutes a successful, safe community.
Certainly. Yeah, one of the advantages that Sheriff Bach and I have discussed in the past is when you bring the federal government in resources, not just federal agents like the DEA and IRS and ICE and ATF and FBI, but it's also our prison system. There's approximately 118 federal holding facilities and prisons throughout the United States. As the sheriff mentioned, unlike the state system where someone gets incarcerated because of the overcrowding and because of the sentencing differences between state and federal law, oftentimes they won't spend a great deal of time in prison. When they do so, they typically hang around their homeboys or homegirls in the local prisons. They fall prey to joining Mexican mafia, all the issues that we have to deal with here in California. In the federal system, the individuals arrested today are looking at going to one of the 118 federal prisons. One might end up in South Dakota, the other one out in Alabama, etc. They're actually spread out throughout the United States, which decreases their ability to continue gang activity. The other thing, again, the sentences. They're all looking at life in prison. One of these individuals is looking at life without possibility of parole. The least sentence available to these defendants arrested today is 10 years, and we don't have 50% good time, work time credit in the federal system. They'll do 85% as an absolute minimum. So we have that kind of resources. I've offered my resources and those of the other federal districts. We are now housing for the first time inmates who are being prosecuted by my office are being held in 5 federal districts, including all the way out in Arizona. We filled our beds, we're filling other beds, and we'll continue to do so as long as the community needs us to do so.
Ecstatic. Well, it's a huge problem. You know, the Department of Corrections has absolutely thumbed their nose at the Antelope Valley. They have said, we really don't care what you're doing in the Antelope Valley to get rid of crime. You know, what the Sheriff's Department has done in this community is world-changing, because it's never been done anywhere else in the world in this short period of time. I mean, they really are rewriting the book on law enforcement. And then last week we find that the Department of Corrections wants to turn one of the yards into a special needs yard, which is going to have huge ramifications for this community. And when we meet with them, you know, their response is pretty much, yeah, well, we understand that you don't like it, but too bad, we're the state and you're the city. And that really is how the state has been treating the cities and the counties, is we're the state, we can do whatever we want to you instead of what we can do for you. And that was precisely the response, and it's going to have a terrible effect. Well, special needs is just a nice word, a nice way of saying rapist, child molester, you know, violent gang member. It's the worst of the worst. And now what happens is you put them in a special needs yard, and now their families move up here. And, you know, I'd like to say that everybody came from a nice, upstanding family, but the truth is birds of a feather flock together, and we get that same type of person into our community. And then to compound the problem, what will happen is the Department of Corrections will release these people at the bus station and hope that they get home. You know, and what we find is that they don't get home. And this is in the face of the sheriff. I was in the meeting when the sheriff said, we'll give you the buses so we can bus these people back to the counties where they came from. They're still being released into our community. We have, and it's not a situation of us saying not in our backyard. You know, they don't get to say not in our backyard to us. We have a 15% unemployment, most of the Section 8. We have more parolees, more people on probation. You know, what they've done to this community is astonishing. And in spite of that, the Sheriff's Department has reduced crime 10% for the year, 30% if you look at the last quarter of 2007 compared to 2008. Nowhere in the world has anybody done that. That's the short answer.
And nobody stands alone in this issue, because this is where the cities are going to support each other in this issue over the prison. What Mayor Parrish is talking about is absolutely correct. What affects one city affects the other. We stand united, like the agencies you see today. We stand united as communities, cities, unincorporated, collectively. We want a better application of how our prison locally is being looked upon by the state.
What we really want is everybody who watches this newscast to send an email to the governor's office saying, don't do this. It's simply wrong. Okay?
Well, absolutely. We feel we get more than our fair share. However, given proper resources, just like you see today, you're seeing an outstanding operation come to fruition. Great results are coming out of this. When we are given the resources, meaning when the sheriff has been given the resources, when all agencies that protect our public given the resources, we can make a huge difference. So here we are in an era of budget cuts. We cannot allow anybody to consider cutting this part of our budgets. It's off limits.
That's absolutely correct. What we're doing is we're increasing the sheriff's budget. We're cutting everything else, but we're increasing the sheriff's budget. And hopefully the Board of Supervisors is going to recognize that in this phase of economic crisis, unlike the last time, that they should be doing the same thing. That this is not a budget that should ever be cut. Especially in light of what we're facing. You know, there's another story to be told in that gang thing. Look at that. That is an integrated gang. That is a change. You know, gangs are now integrating. Whenever things are segregated, they're not as successful. When they integrate, they become more successful. That works for the good and the bad. This is becoming a terrible, terrible problem, and we're terribly frightened that the Board of Supervisors will cut the Sheriff's Department budget, and it will have terrible consequences if they do.
Well, let me say this. The Supervisor Antonovich has been the strongest advocate for not cutting the sheriff's budget and also has been there to increase it. I think we have an opportunity with our new president and the stimulus package. I have prepared a document for an additional 280 deputy sheriffs that would essentially be funded at $88 million over a 3-year period exclusively by the federal government. It will also allow for the county to do more with what we're trying to achieve here in other parts of the county. I also believe that when you pull together the contract cities opportunity for the stimulus package. It really is the right thing to do. This new president has said local law enforcement matters, and we're going to put jobs on the street for public safety purposes. So it's possible that we could have as many as 300 to 450 additional deputy sheriff resources just from the stimulus package if you combine contract city opportunity with county opportunity. And we don't have a whole lot of time in which to do this. There's a short window of application. But I'm confident that the board has done its best to augment my budget appropriately. We are suffering some cuts, but we're not suffering frontline law enforcement cuts. The men and women who are here in the audience with you, behind you, are our #1 leadership resource when it comes to fighting crime. And my goal is to continually keep that as strongest part of the organization. And right now we're stronger than we've ever been. I've met with the warden at the prison. I've offered assistance. There are some reentry programs that he is interested that we do in the county system. There is a need to help inmates prepare themselves for release and not just release them as being planned by the federal court. We will ultimately end up with as many as 15 to 20,000 inmates if the federal court has its way on their early release program. That is unacceptable because people that are not prepared to reenter society are more likely to go back for future crimes and violations of parole. So there is a need for the state to work more vigorously to do intelligent internal management of the prison system, and a person that goes to prison should be given every opportunity to rehabilitate themselves while they're in prison. And so that's the difficulty that we're facing. High-risk inmates concentrated in the high desert is not a good strategy. It should be diffused throughout the entire penal system and have each penal system as a model as to how to do reentry and a model as to how to do dispersed high-risk rehabilitation programs, not concentrate them all together for the sake of expediency and whatever rationale is being used. It's not good policy. Okay, we're all done. Thank you very much.